Your tomato plant looks healthier than ever right now. So why are your tomatoes staying small, or worse, starting to rot from the bottom? The mistake behind it is one almost every gardener makes in July. The leaves are dark green. New growth won't stop. From the outside, the plant looks perfect, but the fruit tells a completely different story. Those tomatoes are still small, smaller than they should be at this point in the season. And on one of them, when you turn it over, there's a soft, dark, sunken patch on the bottom, right where you'd never see it unless you flipped it. You're doing exactly what worked a month ago, feeding the same fertilizer on the same schedule. And that's exactly why your tomatoes are falling behind. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what to feed tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants in July, and what to stop doing immediately. Here's the first move. Stop feeding nitrogen-heavy fertilizer and switch to something built around potassium and phosphorus instead. A product labeled monopotassium phosphate works well here. Mix about half a tablespoon into a gallon of water and water each plant with roughly 2 cups of that mix at the base. Always check your specific product's label too, since concentrations vary between brands. No nitrogen in this one, and that matters a lot right now. Nitrogen builds leaves and new growth. That's exactly what you wanted in June. But by July, too much nitrogen keeps pushing leafy growth while the fruit struggles to catch up, and whatever energy the plant has left over is all the fruit gets. The plant isn't confused about what you're feeding it. It's simply following whichever signal is strongest, and right now that signal is still telling it to build more leaves instead of finishing the fruit it already has. I used to feed all 3 of these crops exactly the same way. My tomatoes looked fantastic. My peppers kept dropping flowers until I finally changed the schedule, and I changed nothing except that within a couple of weeks the peppers stopped dropping nearly as many flowers. But here's where almost everyone gets fooled. That sunken spot on the bottom of the fruit isn't caused by the same thing as small fruit size, even though people lump them together. One common reason for undersized fruit is that the plant is still putting too much energy into leafy growth. The fruit spot is most often linked to poor calcium delivery during early fruit development, caused by inconsistent watering. A plant that gets soaked one day and left bone dry the next struggles to move calcium up into the fruit even when there's plenty sitting in the soil, because calcium travels through the plant dissolved in water, not on its own. So a grower who waters deeply but irregularly can do everything right with fertilizer and still watch that same dark spot show up on fruit after fruit. In many gardens, keeping soil moisture consistent with mulch and regular watering does as much to reduce that sunken spot as changing fertilizer. For root feeding, mix about a tablespoon of calcium nitrate into a gallon of water and give each plant roughly 2 cups at the base. For a lighter touch, spray it directly on the leaves in cool parts of the day, early morning or evening, and follow your product's label to avoid leaf burn. One thing that trips people up: never mix calcium nitrate with sulfates or phosphates in the same batch. Keep them on separate days, at least 5 to 7 days apart, or you'll end up with compounds that won't dissolve, and the calcium never actually reaches the plant. Peppers behave differently. Even if you're growing mostly tomatoes, this pepper mistake is worth knowing because many gardeners feed both crops exactly the same way. A pepper plant doesn't like big swings. Feed it once a week and let it dry out in between, and you'll see blossom drop even with the right fertilizer. Smaller, more frequent feedings and steady moisture work better here. Most people don't realize this because peppers and tomatoes sit side by side in the same bed and get watered from the same can without a second thought. Peppers often seem less forgiving of moisture swings than tomatoes, so the same schedule that keeps your tomatoes happy can leave peppers stressed between feedings without you noticing. Splitting a pepper's feeding into 2 lighter doses instead of 1, and checking its soil specifically, tends to show up as firmer fruit and fewer dropped blossoms within a few weeks. One more mix-up worth clearing up here. People often assume a plant that's dropping flowers is simply too stressed to fruit at all, and stop feeding it altogether to let it recover. If moisture swings are the cause, stopping fertilizer altogether usually doesn't solve the problem. A steadier watering and feeding routine is often the better fix, since the plant hasn't actually lost its ability to set fruit. It just needs the stress removed rather than the food. There's another mistake worth catching before we move on. If you've noticed the upper leaves on an eggplant turning pale between the veins while the veins stay dark green, That's not the tomato or pepper problem. That's a magnesium shortage, and it shows up in that vein pattern because magnesium sits at the center of the chlorophyll molecule. A light dose of Epsom salt, about 2 teaspoons dissolved into a gallon of water, sprayed on the leaves, tends to help within a couple of weeks. Eggplants also get treated like an afterthought next to tomatoes and peppers, but they're often among the hungriest crops in the summer garden. And a grower who assumes the eggplant needs less attention usually ends up wondering why it's the one struggling instead of thriving alongside the other two. Now here's the frustrating part. If the soil is very dry, water first and let the moisture soak in before applying fertilizer, or it can sit on the surface and burn whatever roots it touches instead of reaching where it's needed. It seems minor, but it makes a much bigger difference than most people expect, and it's one of the easiest steps to skip on a hot, busy afternoon when you just want the feeding done and the watering can put away. There's an exception worth knowing too. A lot of gardening advice says to feed more when a plant looks stressed. In the middle of a heat wave, that backfires. A plant already struggling to pull moisture through its roots can't process a concentrated feeding on top of that stress. On the hottest days, skip the feeding and just keep the soil evenly moist. But there's one hidden reason fertilizer sometimes seems to do absolutely nothing. Your soil's own pH. Potassium and calcium can be sitting right there in the soil and still be locked up and unavailable to the roots if the pH is off. Which means a plant can show every symptom of a deficiency even after you've fed it correctly. A simple pH test can tell you whether your soil is in the range where those nutrients are most available. Skip that step, and you can end up feeding the right thing over and over into soil that simply won't release it. And this is where many gardeners waste money. If you'd rather avoid synthetic fertilizers altogether, wood ash can provide potassium and calcium, but use it sparingly and avoid it on alkaline soils, since it's naturally alkaline itself and can push soil pH the wrong direction. Recipes vary, but one traditional recipe uses 2 cups steeped in hot water, topped up to about 2.5 gallons, left to sit for 24 hours. Strain it, then water each plant with about 2 cups at the base. Just don't mix it with nitrogen fertilizer or fresh manure in the same feeding. One last thing people often mix up. Yellow, dry leaf edges and that sunken fruit spot look almost identical from a distance, and it's easy to assume they're the same problem. They're not. Dry, crisping leaf margins point to potassium falling behind, showing up furthest from the roots. The fruit spot is most often linked to poor calcium delivery, specific to that one developing fruit. Treat both with the same all-purpose feeding, and you'll patch one while leaving the other completely untouched. Here's what finally made the difference for me. The plant usually puts its energy where your feeding program encourages it to. A lush, fast-growing plant isn't proof you're doing everything right. Sometimes it's proof the plant is doing exactly what you told it to, just not what you wanted. Instead of using the same fertilizer every week, many experienced gardeners switch nutrient sources through the month. Wood ash one week, a fast-acting phosphorus source the next, something gentler for the soil after that. It's not about feeding more. It's about feeding differently as July's demands shift week to week. It's one working approach rather than the only right one, and most gardeners adjust their feeding as the season changes. So if you've been standing in front of a beautiful tomato plant wondering why the fruit isn't keeping pace, you're not doing anything wrong exactly. You were just feeding last month's plant instead of this month's. A healthy-looking plant doesn't always mean a healthy harvest. Feed the plant for the stage it's actually in, and the difference is often surprising, especially once you've seen it happen in your own garden. If this helped you save even a few tomatoes, give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the August feeding guide, and share this with another gardener who's wondering why their plants look healthy but aren't producing. Tell me in the comments, have you seen blossom end rot this season?